Hi, in this presentation, I'll be taking you through the attrition problem in the higher education. But before we move forward with the problem of attrition, let's just look at some more interesting facts. This particular presentation is more to do with the domestic students, because if you look at this little infographic, it shows clearly that undergraduate enabling and non-award students accounted for almost 70.8% of all the students. And more so, this is the domestic students at the bachelor degree. The growth has been exponential, but it is noteworthy that the enrollments have actually declined of late in the undergraduate degrees, especially the domestic enrollments. The government well supports the bachelor's degree program, and despite of that, the overall net operating margins are on decline for the universities, as illustrated in this graph here. And still, the undergraduate degree program students constitute the majority of the total enrollments. And the bottom line, the three different facts that we deduced from the above graph and statistics is that majority of the students that are enrolled in the university are the ones at the bachelor's degree level. And more so out of that, also the proportion of the domestic students is more, especially at the undergraduate level. And the worst scenario is the operating margins for the universities are actually on decline. And that means, based on these facts, plus the COVID-19 scenario, it is time to shift our focus on the domestic students at undergraduate level and their retention. So conversely, we need to minimize the attrition level if we want sustainable revenues for the universities besides just the research funding. Attrition, it could be defined as students who are enrolled in a course but left the higher degree education system entirely without completion of the course. And this attrition becomes all the more magnified if we look at the data that is unadjusted rates. So the domestic students at the bachelor rates are much more, about 20% plus. So the situation is definitely not a great one to look at. And this is despite of some very interesting facts that your employability chances are at least better, or your chances of being unemployed with a bachelor's degree is at least relatively lesser than the average. And also employer satisfaction with the graduate attributes and overall satisfaction level is up to 92%. And likewise, the undergraduate student experience has also been up to 80%. What it means is that the educational experience overall is good, but despite of all these positive aspects or dimensions of taking up undergraduate degree at a bachelor's level, the question then arises as to why still the attrition. Why do the students who choose to study in an institution eventually leave it? It's not as simple as it sounds. Attrition is a wicked problem. Wicked as in it is non-linear. What it means is that there's no one common solution or one hat solution when it comes to attrition as a problem. If we have to address it, it must be actually addressed at the root level. And to address it at the root level, again, we need to kind of sort the data in a way that we got to be very, very specifically reaching at the roots in terms of the fact whether it is undergraduate or postgraduate, is it face-to-face or is it online, is it part-time or it is full-time. So too many dimensions have to be taken into account. And that's where I had created a little data sorter. This is still not 100% in terms of having further details on how this can be further classified. And that's where we need to take the details. But anyways, in this particular presentation, I'm taking the case of undergraduate students at bachelor's level, the domestic students, undergraduate and bachelor's is very interesting, isn't it? Okay, so in this presentation, as I suggested, that we would be looking at the undergraduate students, that to domestic students, and we're working on different solutions for this particular problem of attrition. But before we move forward with that, let us ascertain one more time, more clearly, as to what are the causes of attrition at different levels at undergraduate, bachelor degree. So attrition in the first year is associated with the lack of clarity on goal that affects student level of commitments. And at the second year, which is in fact almost 50% of the total attrition, which comes from the second year, the reason is often with the academic confidence. And the third year students is on the future orientation and the university reputation. So the solution that I came up with was for the first year classrooms in terms of the flipped classroom learning and a completely virtual learning environment setup, wherein the participation is definitely far data driven and accessible. And but the objective is, because the students at the first year often lack that clarity in terms of what degree do they want, this kind of a setup wherein the students have kind of an experiential learning brings in greater clarity to the minds of the students, and they know which degrees or which disciplines to go in for their major courses, and definitely makes learning much more entertaining, interesting, and keeps the level of this motivation for the students higher. And keeping it at the block level, block mode in the first semester, and in the second semester it could be again the assignments could be based on what they learn in the first semester. However, the virtual learning environment should be open to these students throughout across the whole year, so that in case a student does not realizes eventually that marketing wasn't his cup of tea, he could move to another field and experience that virtual learning environment. And that's what the idea is, that giving a greater comfortable learning environment wherein students actually have a much greater clarity of what they want to do, and thus their commitment levels can increase. The second year learning can still continue to be the way it is as of now. However, in the earliest research, it has been established that too much of a regulated environment can be very suffocating for the students and thus detrimental to the learning. And hence, the learning must be at a learner-driven pace for that academic confidence, for that bit of greater motivation. For instance, assignments or any of the assessments should not be actually penalty-driven, but instead reward-driven. For instance, if there's a strategic student who was wanting to, submit the work earlier because he's very skilled at time management or is having a completely different demographic background, it could be motivating for the student to submit it earlier. But on the other hand, if there's someone who's literally new to the entire learning setup, completely from a different demographic, setting his foot to learn better, definitely should have that opportunity to continue learning, but submit the assignment at a certain pace, of course, by the end of the semester. But let no student leave the education just because they cannot, cope up with the deadlines or the pressure of studies. And that definitely, in other words, means greater retention level. Now, I would definitely want to also highlight the fact that when I'm talking of the problem of attrition, it is not just restricted to the university or the university revenue, but the bottom line is we are looking at more educated people, and the social benefits it brings to the whole community, for the whole nation, is immense, and which is why we do not want the students to leave early without completing their education. So it has a much bigger purpose rather than just the university revenue. So with the second year learning, as we said, that's one of the strategies. Of course, I prefer to the learning and teaching model simple to complex that has been actually done by my own self. Um, Not much of the details are in this one, but yes, it is very much available on my website. The next one is the solution on bringing in further better learning and teaching experience and a better student teacher learning experience. And that is only possible, or better engagement is only possible when we gauge the progress of the learner and the lecturers. And that is where the learning and teaching surveys come in place. The formative aspect of learning and teaching evaluations. While we say that they are formative, but these surveys are often conducted only by the 11th or the 12th week of a semester at the end of the term. And universities associate a big planning value towards these surveys so that the teachers can, it's more of a KPI actually, it becomes more of a summative assessment for the teachers rather than the actual purpose wherein we want to address the learning needs of our students in the given cohort. So I would strongly recommend that when it comes to gauging the progress of the learners and the lecturers, the learning and teaching evaluations must be done in week 4, 8 for the formative purposes, because what is working well for this present cohort or what's not working well for this cohort may not be exactly the same perception for the next set of the students. And this is why if I want to help the students in my present cohort, I need to have that feedback from my present students and be able to implement the changes for my present students alongside. So, and that definitely is the way to move forward and have the better goal of student retention. And this particular formative survey or this L&T survey need not be very lengthy with 12 or 14 or 15 questions, which again deters the students from completing them. So instead, they should be reflective of questions as in what the teacher could do better, what the student could do better, or what the student and the teacher together could do better to make the learning experience more engaging. So that's where the responsibility of learning becomes shared. Also, the data collected from this will give further insight into the ways the learning can be supported with systems developed in line with the issues most recognized, and thereby there'll be more customized solutions to the problem of attrition and learning needs of the students. Another one is about the attendance. When most of the universities tend to manage or monitor these attendance records for early intervention. However, if the reasons for this non-attendance are not found, this definitely could convert into attrition. Hence, I recommend a quick follow-up survey with the students with just 3 bullet parameters or basic parameters in terms of is it the course content that's deterring the student from coming to the classes, or is it the learning environment, or is it personal? Now, the whole objective again here is to have a data-driven solution, as in if we know what the reason is for the absenteeism, we can address it immediately. So in other words, if it was to do with the contents, maybe we need to review that. If it's majority of the students say it's the learning environment in a particular class, the attendance rate is really poor, means maybe it's a learning environment we need to address, or on the other side, maybe the personal reasons in that situation, we need to strengthen our social welfare or student support team. The data based on the attendance and on the reasons, and thus custom-driven solutions would mean better customer care and thus retention. While this is an excess of data maybe, but again, the lecturers just had only one poll question at the end of each session to see where the students are in terms of their understanding or linkages of the topic, to get hold of better idea about the threshold concepts, as well as the overall learning scenario for the students, as well as the lecturers to improve or to transform, if at all the need be. And that is where it will also facilitate better retention rates and encourage the students to continue. This is it about the retention, rather the problem of attrition or how to improve on retention. I hope you enjoy it.